Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Chapter 6 is about basic interpersonal skills. How fun. Maybe. There we go. As we learned previously, a good counselor displays warmth, empathy, respect, and genuineness. Additionally, a good professional must accurately observe, effectively attend, and actively listen. Observing means noticing all behaviors that accompany communication. This type of communication is known as nonverbal communication. Facial expressions, breathing patterns like sighing, gestures, movement, and posture. Being a good observer increases understanding of what clients are communicating. It can supplement what your client is telling you verbally. It may verify what is being said or contradict it. If a practitioner gets conflicting messages, the nonverbal meaning is usually closer to the actual meaning. Practitioners often comment on contradictions. One of the things that we need to think about in doing online counseling is that people who are face to face with you are more likely to act defensively, so that they will try to hide their feelings. They'll try to hide their expressions, their body language, in essence, their body language. But one of the things we've discovered on Zoom and Skype and all of the other computer communication, visual communication systems, is that people are less defensive on Zoom, and so they're less likely to try to hide something. Lots of examples of people doing things that they wouldn't do face to face. Well, we won't go into the. One of the things that they're discovering is that they're seeing more sexual content to what people are doing, and some of them have turned out really negatively. But the point is that people are less defensive online. They're more likely to make the facial expression that they're actually thinking, than if they're face to face. Because when they're face to face, they tend to be more defensive, and they'll try to block their nonverbal communication. Good observers pay special attention to facial expressions. Facial expressions can show any emotion. If the client shows no emotion, known as the flat effect, it may indicate depression. This is the man that tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan. He was one of the only inmates at St. Elizabeth's in Washington, D.C. There weren't a lot of people around, and he did suffer from depression. So that look on his face is what a flat effect is. Other indicators of depression include little body movement and slumped posture. Mere sadness, on the other hand, is much more animated. It involves sighing and crying and looking down, increasing the amount of fluid in your eyes. This would be sad. If they were depressed, they wouldn't have the energy. They wouldn't show any emotion at all. Their face would have what they refer to as the flat effect. So what this person is showing is the flat effect. What this person is showing is sadness, and of course the two aren't the same. Depression is chronic, and sadness is tends to be tends to change over time. Stress is expressed by muscle tension, movement, shallow breathing. Looking away may indicate thinking, remembering, or being hesitant about talking. Clenched fists must be interpreted by the context of the situation and may indicate stress, may indicate frustration or anger, or potentially anxiety. The counselor must remember that gestures are culturally developed. So you need to understand that the culture that the individual is that they come from. When someone experiences strong emotions, their skin tone may change color, darkening or looking rosier than usual. Skin tone change usually starts at the chest and moves up the face. One thing that I've learned over my 72 years of life is that, yeah, a lot of times we're talking about, it's easier to talk about white people because white people don't have a whole lot of melanin to hide their change of skin tone. So when their skin changes tone, it really changes tone. And it's really quite obvious. But the reality is that everybody has the same reactions. What is blushing? Blushing is a mere flushing of blood into the cheeks. That's all it is. Well, white people can have that, but also Hispanic individuals who have a little bit more melanin, they're browner, they're a little bit darker. They will show a change of skin tone as well. African Americans, of course, will have the same thing. I had a friend that was African American, and he came to work and he was really sad, and I could tell, and he looked like he didn't feel very well. And when I say he looked like he didn't feel very well, what I'm saying is he looked pale. Now it's really odd to say that someone as dark as he was had a great deal of melanin could look pale, but the reality was he looked ashen. His skin tone wasn't as rich as it normally was. You could see it in his eyes, you could see it in his lips, you could see it in his nail beds, you could certainly see it in his face. He just looked paler. And of course, when I mentioned that to him, he laughed, of course, and that improved his skin tone. But he said, "How can you tell?" And I said, dude, I've been around you a long time, and I know when you usually are a pretty healthy fella, but when you're not looking good, you're not looking good, and your skin looks paler, and of course he laughed again because of my pale, compared to me, there's nothing pale about that individual. But the reality is, if you are around this person, then you know what pale looks like. One of the things we learned in the hospital, of course, or in the emergency room, you would see people that you had never seen before. So how in the world did you know that they look different? Whether no matter what skin tone they had. Well, one of the ways of telling what you're dealing with is to look either at the nail beds or at the gums, because there's nothing, that's inside your body. That's mucous membrane, or not the nail beds, of course, but everybody's nail beds are pink, and everybody's gums are inside their body. So this is like looking down somebody's throat by looking at their gums. Anyway, that's how we would do it. We'd look at their eyes and look at the irises, look at not their irises, but the sclera, the white portion of their eyes, and we'd look at their nail beds and we'd look at their gums in order to determine if there was any difference. Facial expression, what emotion do they seem to be displaying? Do they have tears in their eyes? Is the mouth turned up or down? Is the brow wrinkled? Are there circles under their eyes? Are they smiling? Eye movement and eye contact. Are they looking mostly at the floor? Are they looking mostly at the ceiling? Are they looking around the room? Are they looking directly at another person? Are they staring? Body position. Are they sitting? Are they leaning back, slumped over, slouched, upright and stiff, legs crossed, feet flat on the floor, legs curled under, legs crossed, ankles crossed? All of these things will give you information. Body movement, did they hardly move at all? Did they move slightly? Did they fidget most of the time? Did they nod their head or swing their legs? Did their movement change during the interchange? Breathing pattern, did their breathing seem normal? Did they often sigh? Did they take deep breaths? Did they breathe in a shallow way? Muscle tone, are their fists clenched? Is their jaw tightly closed? Are they slumping? Is their face slack? Was their muscle tone changed during the interchange? Was their muscle tone changed? Okay. Gestures, what were they doing with their hands? Did their hands stay in their lap folded together? Were their hands moving around most of the time? Were their hands in tight fists? Did they make circles with their arms or their hands? Did they show their palms? That usually means peace, or I want to negotiate. That's what the open palms means. Skin tone, did you notice any change in skin tone? When in a group therapy situation, it is important that the practitioner observe everyone in the group. They should not only observe the individual speaking, but how the members of the group are reacting to what the speaker is saying. When the practitioner scans the group, it also encourages the speaker to speak to everyone, not just the practitioner. Often in a group situation, there will be two leaders, and the two can trade off assignments of observation. It is necessary to observe the people in large groups. This can be done by looking for telltale actions of individuals or groups of individuals. Are they fidgeting? Is their facial expression incongruent with what you're talking about? Are the shoulders hunched? Is the mouth pinched? Are the eyes closed? Attending involves being totally focused on the client. Attending isn't as easy as it seems. Often when we are listening to someone, we're hearing what they are saying, but we're trying to compose what we are going to say when it is our turn to speak. Very common for people to do this. You're trying to think of something brilliant to say. In my case, of course, being as old as I am, I'm trying to think of to make sure that I know all the words I want to speak. A lot of times I'll forget words. I was at a meeting this morning with an older gentleman, and he kept losing words. He just couldn't think of the word. It wasn't readily available to him. He was a little bit nervous, so he kept losing words, and that's kind of embarrassing. It just happened to me a minute ago. I can't remember what I was talking about now. Well, there. If it happens to me again, I'll show you what I'm talking about. While there are some cultural differences in the way that someone shows attending, for the most part, it is shown by leaning slightly forward in a relaxed, comfortable position, sitting in an open and accessible way. Face expresses appropriate concern. Facial expressions are extremely important. The facial expression should be congruent to what the client is relating and experiencing. For most people, this comes naturally, but some are taught to smile or laugh at adversity, and that's the way I was taught. My mother was a nurse, and of course, between the two of us, I worked in medicine for 30 years. She worked in medicine for almost 70 years. So one of the things we were able to do was to dissipate all the tragedy and horror that we saw through laughing and smiling. I laughed and smiled more than she did because, well, she was working directly with the patient, and I was usually just kind of there tertiarily. In other words, I was there to draw blood, or I was there to, well, usually to draw blood or to do something else. But it was rarely a hands-on situation other than drawing blood. This is really kind of interesting. I guess this is a flaw in my character, but I've been married to my wife for, let's see, 43 years. I've been married to my wife for 43 years. And when I'm mad at her, I can't, it's hard for me to tell her that I'm mad with my facial expression because anytime I look at her, I just smile. I can't help myself. I don't laugh; that would be unkind. But I smile. So she she has a really hard time telling when I'm upset with her, which happens from time to time. I'm a psychologist. My wife is an MBA, so she handles all the money, and sometimes Sometimes she won't let me spend any money, but that's not that bad. I have no idea how much money I make, so because she just takes it all. Well, I give it to her, of course, but it's really kind of frustrating, and sometimes it's irritating when I want to do something and she decides we can't because of money. We're pretty comfortable right now. We just well, we won't go into that. Anyway, okay, so she can't tell when I'm mad because I can't help but smile at her when I see her. It's a tragedy. I can't be have a stink eye. I can't give my wife the stink eye. Maintaining regular eye contact is another way that you can show that you are paying attention. People from Asia and those from Northern Europe tend to prefer a more peripheral gaze, finding the direct stare too intense. Any distracting behavior, including taking notes, should be avoided as it distracts from the process. They may see fidgety movements on your part as disinterest, impatience, or boredom. And that's what boredom looks like right there. She must be at one of my lectures. That's sad. Another way to communicate involvement is through minimal encouragement. Minimal encouragement involves repeating one or two words a person says, nodding, saying something in the affirmative like uh-huh, or nodding. There you go. Of course, you need those purple uh, John Lennon glasses. Okay. That's the way you do it. Anyway, I have a real problem talking to people because um, they tell me their life story. And I'm not sure why. I guess I have that open, stupid look. So people just want to tell me things. I get into some really long conversations, and I hear people's life stories a lot. I'll be standing in line at Walmart or something, and all of a sudden the person will turn around and just start talking to me. A lot of times I'll turn around and talk to somebody. I'll talk to the person in front of me. I'll talk to the person behind me. It seems silly to me that everybody is in their own little silo and nobody will communicate. But that there can be a problem with that because people want to tell you their troubles. Listening involves fully focusing on what the other person is trying to communicate. Listening actually goes beyond attending. And the reality is, I'm really interested in what people have to say. I enjoy hearing people's stories. Most of us are composing in our own minds as others talk to us, but listening is is total absorption in what the client is saying. I had a friend. I think I told you guys that I went on a Fulbright trip to South and Central America. We were looking at indigenous populations. It was back in 2003, and one of the individuals on the trip was a an individual from New York City. He's from New York. He taught American Indian Studies at Billings, at the University of Montana Billings. Anyway, he's this Jewish fellow from New York City. It was really kind of fascinating because we were talking about the research he did and what he did. He was going to Cornell, I think, and Cornell's in Upper New York State, and he decided he wanted to do research on the Navajo people. So he came out to the Navajo Nation, and I can't remember what his topic was, but he would go to elders and he would have conversations with them. And sometimes they didn't speak English, and he had to bring an interpreter along. And of course, he's from New York City. People in New York City are always impatient. Anyway, which was not a good trait to have uh, when dealing with any indigenous people, but especially indigenous people of the Americas, and especially not Dene people. Anyway, so he was talking to these people, and he's he would he would talk to the person, he'd ask them the question, and then they'd just sit there for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 minutes. And finally he said, "Why do you wait so long to give me my answer?" And the guy said, "Well, Roy, your questions are so good, and they make me think so much that I just want to give you the best possible answer I can." And of course, this guy is a Jewish guy from New York City. He's very impatient, and he really had a problem with spending quiet time just sitting there, not nobody saying anything. And of course, it was tough for him. But he had to learn. He had to readjust his mind. He had to shift gears in his brain to listen or to wait for the person to give him the answer. And of course, they always gave him a really good answer. Um, and he was very appreciative of that. But of course, being from New York and being chronically impatient, he had a real difficult time sitting there, watching, looking at the individual while he was thinking of a good answer for him. Listening isn't just hearing the words, but conveying the understanding of the implications of what the client is saying. While listening, the practitioner uses minimal encouragement to get the client to continue disclosing. And usually that's facial expressions, just like this one. We saw the nodding before. Okay. We see how intense you have to look at the client in order to show them that you are listening and that you're not being impatient. There we go. Listening involves noticing the client's communication style, including your tone, their volume, the speed of delivery, noticing pauses, the silence. And this is really tough for white people. If you have a client that's a white person, then this may be a real problem for them, unless they're cowboys. Cowboys seem to be able to handle silence better than just about anybody else. And potentially it has to do with the fact that they spend a lot of quiet time just with their own thoughts. But especially a city person, I'm a rural, somebody who is a ruralist like me, silence isn't that destructive to my mindset. But city people, they're used to things happening as quickly as they can. They want everything to be 5G. They want all their connections to be lightning fast. So silence is tough for especially urban dwellers. So if you happen to have a white client from Phoenix, it might be that they talk fast, they answer as quickly as possible. A lot of times they don't put very much thought into it, so their answers aren't all that good. So, but silence is really kind of fascinating when we're dealing with clients. How long can you sit there? If you watched Good Will Hunting, they spent the first 3 or 4 sessions not saying anything at all, just waiting for Will to decide that he actually needed or wanted to do this, and they were perfectly happy just sitting there. Now, for a city person watching that movie, it probably drove them crazy. But of course, I'm a psychologist, so I understood what was going on. And I thought it was very cathartic for both of them to just sit there. But for city people watching that movie, it probably drove them nuts. Changes in patterns of speech, of course, that's what we're looking for as well. Communication styles vary by culture and between families. Some communication styles are direct, some are clear, easy to understand. Some use jargon or colloquialisms. They may use narrative style, confused circular manner, where they talk around issues. They may jump from one topic to another. This may be a family where ADHD is a problem in the family. They do not complete their thoughts. This may be a family that there may be borderline personality disorder in the family, or bipolar disorder or borderline. or schizophrenia, possibly. Anyway, some families are fairly schizophrenic, and they're not diagnosable because they don't have psychotic episodes, but their mind pattern just bounces from one topic to the other. Communication can only take place if you allow the client proper time to express their thoughts and feelings. Silence is good for the client as it allows them to garner their thoughts. Many practitioners are uncomfortable with silence and want to fill it with their own voice, especially city people who are white. And this is a problem with that white people have. They're impatient. They've never been around people that aren't impatient, and because so they think that that's the only way to be. Uh, you may have noticed this with select white people that when they first come to an Indian reservation, they have a real difficult time with silence, especially if they're from the city. Um, Personally, I don't trust people who talk too fast. It seems to me like they're trying to put something over on me, like they're trying to say something. It's like the fine print. That's what I'm seeing when I hear people talk too fast. Sometimes on the telephone, people they get paid by the number of calls they make, so they say their spiel as rapidly as they possibly can. Well, sometimes I just tell them, speaking so fast, I don't understand a word that you're saying. But that's if you look at social psychology will tell you that the faster people talk, the more expertise theoretically that they have. But I don't really agree with that. It seems to me that if you have expertise, then you can explain things to people without needing to speak so fast they don't understand. Even when practitioners are fully focused on listening, they may misinterpret the client's words. A client may use emotional words differently because of cultural or familial imperatives. Interpretation must be explained by the client. This is a very common problem, the fact that they use a word and people misinterpret what they think that the word means. Um, so this is something that needs to be explained by the client. What the client says affects the practitioner. It is important for practitioners to listen to their own responses as a way of further understanding what the client is saying. If a client is speaking in a monotone about something very sad, and the practitioner does not experience any personal response to this, it is important to determine whether the client is allowing himself or herself to feel the feeling of the practitioner is detached. Warmth is expressed through demeanor, concern, acceptance, tone of voice, posture, listening carefully. Touch can be a way of expressing warmth when used appropriately. Of course, you have to be careful. No touching between client and counselor. This is not advisable. The appropriate expression of warmth can depend on many diversity issues. Gender influences how warmth is expressed, particularly, this is influenced by various religious or spiritual beliefs. Racial and ethnic differences in cultural norms influence the expression of warmth. The power differential between different people can confuse how expressions of warmth are interpreted between a child and an adult, a doctor and a patient, or a person with perceived economic power with one who does not have this. One of the things I have noticed, this is the third reservation I've worked on. Um, Working on the Northern Plains, the people on the Northern Plains are just a little bit touchier. They're a little bit warmer. And the reason I say that is because they hug a lot. They always make skin-to-skin contact. I'm talking about either shaking hands or hugging is really big up there. I was working for this lady, and she really didn't like me very much. But my father died, and I was going back. I needed to go back home, and so she came in to tell me that I could leave. I was teaching. Um, my dad's kind of funny. My, my dad my dad was a banker, and he wanted his kids to work. So if he came to visit, he always came so that he'd arrive on the weekend, so you could spend time with him, and then he would never stay. He would never. You never had to take a day off so that he could so that you could interact with him. So he was always there. We didn't work on Fridays, so he would never arrive on a Wednesday, or you would think, oh, maybe I need to take Thursday off. I think he would never do that because that's he didn't believe in that. So my dad my dad was sick, and he was dying, of course, and he was ready to go, and he didn't want me to miss any work. So my dad died. Let's see, how did this work? He died on Wednesday night. And so, um, and his funeral was Friday. Okay. So the idea was, and I was up in Montana. So the idea was that he died on Wednesday night, and I worked on Thursday. No, his funeral was Saturday. So he died Wednesday night, and I taught on Thursday, and then on Friday I flew out Thursday night. Um, so I got there in time, and everything happened. So here's my dad. Here's my dad selecting his day to die so that I could so that I wouldn't miss any work. That's the kind of guy he was. But the president of the college came in, and um, I can't remember. I told somebody, but I didn't want to tell anybody because I knew that they would expect me to leave right away, and I wanted to get my teaching in that day. And somebody told her that my dad had died the night before, and that I was planning on leaving after work. Um, and so she came in, and she she gave me a hug. It's the first time she ever touched me, I'll tell you. But it was really kind of interesting. She felt so bad because I didn't. She what she wanted me to do was to leave right away, or to be really upset. Well, my dad was 90 years old, and he'd been sick for a while, so I mean, it's not like it was unexpected. I mean, I did feel sad, certainly, but in my family, we don't really we don't really get sad when somebody dies. We celebrate their life. I mean, it's really kind of odd. It's not doesn't have anything to do with religion. It has to do with our philosophy of life and death. So she didn't quite understand because they're the Northern Plains people. They have a wake for a week, that kind of stuff. But I was back to work on Monday. I didn't miss any day. I didn't miss any work, thanks to my dad dying at exactly the right moment. Okay. Anyway, like I said, it's kind of funny to me because I know that was always on my dad's mind. He's a funny guy. Never wanted you to put out to lose any work just because he was coming to visit. Uh, and I didn't. Expressions must be genuine due to the way that the brain functions in thousands of years of history. Individuals are quickly able to pick up warmth that is not genuine. It is important for the practitioner to observe the client's response as a way of judging how warmth was experienced. So we're talking about the warmth evaluation scale. Level 1, the practitioner communicated little or no concern for the client and appeared cold, detached, stiff, and or mechanical. Level 3, at least half the time, the practitioner verbally and non-verbally communicated concern and caring appropriate to the unique needs of the client. Level 5, the practitioner's facial expression and posture consistently communicated concern and caring appropriate to the unique needs of the client. That's level 5. Okay, the Meetings of Anna was really kind of a fascinating movie. A lot of interesting facial expressions from this lady. This is the actress in the movie. Anna has made a film, and she's trying to get people to redistribute the film. It came out and it was popular. Now she wants them to show it again. So she goes to all of these meetings. She's from Belgium. The Belgians they speak Dutch, they speak German, and they speak French. And all three are official languages of the country. So she travels to Amsterdam, she travels to Berlin, she travels to Paris. She's in Brussels, of course. And she's trying to make contact with all the people from her past. Some of them are old lovers, some of them are current lovers, some of them, well, anyway, she meets with her mother, but her facial expressions are just spot on. You don't really need to understand what she's saying, and she's speaking in three different languages. It's just really kind of fascinating. If you ever, um, you can watch this movie without even reading the subtitles. It's just really good. She has these amazing facial expressions, like that one, and that's what she looks like. Here she is smoking. That's the flat effect that we were talking about before. There's the flat effect again. She's trying to decide what she's going to do um, romantically, because her husband has just left her. She's got these old boyfriends and that she runs into on the trip, and she has to decide whether she's going to leave, uh, whether she's going to do something about her husband leaving. And there she is again. And finally, in the end, you can see she has a smile on her face. She has decided that she's going to start a romantic relationship with her best friend, her female best friend, and that's The Meetings of Anna. Interesting movie. Okay, now we need to tackle the next chapter, chapter 7, preparing for a client, and how do we end a session? Okay. The practitioner must get ready to meet with clients. They must gather the referral information that's needed, the forms that they may potentially need, and needed supplies. These should be there. Otherwise, it looks like you don't know what you're doing. Purpose or agenda for the meeting is clarified. Why are why are you meeting with this individual, and what can you do to help them? The practitioner must consider the client's needs and the physical arrangement of the building, the waiting room, the meeting room. If the client has any physical limitations, then the practitioner must make appropriate alterations to the situation, like this. Um, Despite the fact that there's an escalator and a downscalator going up and down, this person is in a wheelchair and can't use any of them. Can't walk the stairs, can't use the escalators. They need an elevator. The client's culture should be considered to ensure that all appropriate steps are taken to make the session as beneficial as possible. If the practitioner does not have a working knowledge of the client's culture, then it is appropriate to research the culture with the understanding that such writing is often stereotyped and inaccurate. Like if we read something about the Dene people, Would we be getting the right information? Well, the truth is that there's a lot of information that you guys don't want anybody to know about you. There are, you're not an open book, okay? And that's okay. It's fine that people have secrets. Sadly, if you gave everybody all your secrets, then they would try to incorporate that into something that had to do with them, and of course that would bastardize the information. The Hopi are the same way. The Hopi have all the secret stuff that they have to do in order to keep the world spinning, and if they don't do it, then the world ends. And of course, most of this stuff they can't tell anybody, and that's okay because that's their job. Their job is to keep the world intact. The practitioner needs to understand how the client may feel about the first meeting. So my point about culture is that you need to understand that by reading about somebody else's culture, you learn about it, but you take it with a grain of salt. You take anything with a grain of salt. Like all Asians eat rice. Well, that's true in the South, but that's not especially true in the North. They eat Chinese noodles in the North. All Americans eat hot dogs. Well, not everybody likes hot dogs, and sometimes, hot dogs aren't always that good for you. I just had 2 hot dogs for lunch with lots of onions and lots of relish, so and mustard, no ketchup. I didn't eat that looks like a praying mantis. I don't eat praying manti. But yesterday I had noodles. I had not Chinese noodles, but Japanese noodles for lunch. So need to find out about people's cultures. The practitioner needs to understand how the client may feel about the first meeting. They may feel embarrassed, hesitant, or uncomfortable. And this is a GIF of uncomfortableness. The practitioner must put away all distracting thoughts so that they can concentrate on the needs of their client. Beginning the first meeting appropriately is essential to the client practitioner relationship. First impressions have lasting effects on future interactions. The greeting is essential to connecting with them. Ground rules need to be clarified, purpose of the meeting, the length of the meeting, any special considerations that need to be addressed. When greeting the client, be aware of the loudness of your voice, the eye contact that you make, and how you address them. I was just reading, I'm reading a book about, I'm actually reading 2 books at the same time. I'm reading one book about boarding schools in the 1890s and another book about the Korean culture. It's really kind of fascinating. Um, the both of the books were talking about how these first interactions with white people, both the Korean lady in the one book and the native people in the other book. It's a book about boarding schools up in Wisconsin on the White Earth reservation. Anyway, they're talking about how the white people always seem to yell at everybody, and that had to do with the fact that the loudness of their voice. They weren't modulating their voices, especially city people. I hate to pick on city people all the time, but the reality is that they live in a loud environment, and a lot of people don't pay attention to each other in that kind of an environment. So there's a lot of yelling taking place. Issues of privacy and confidentiality are important in how you first meet your client. If you must identify a person in a waiting room and cannot guess who your client might be, you can say very quietly, "I am Jesse Melendez." Well, I am whoever you are. "Are you Mrs. Chin, Ms. Chin?" If a receptionist is able to identify your client, you can just identify yourself to the client. Be aware that many clients experience some shame in seeking help, so confidentiality is very important. So if there's somebody else in the waiting room, then be careful of what you say. You don't want to identify that person to the other person in the waiting room. The practitioner should invite the client to introduce themselves. The practitioner should determine how the client wants to be addressed. Some people don't like to use their first names. I obviously do because when people email me, I email them back and I just use my first name. I don't refer to myself as Dr. Bradway or Mr. Bradway. Well, I'm a doctor, so I wouldn't say Mr. Bradway. But I use my first name because I think it's friendlier. Um, and I that's the way I want to be seen by my students, as somebody that's at least a little bit friendly. I don't want to put on airs for anybody. Using a last name in any circumstance shows respect. Some people don't like it. I don't mind if people call me by my last name. Um, Strangely enough, I come from a blue-collar town in Indiana, and all the people that I lived around were either factory workers' kids or they were farm kids, and in that environment, calling somebody by their last name, just their last name, is it means you want to fight them. So you got to be careful how you're talking to people. If you just call them by their last name, it means you don't respect them. So everybody comes from different cultures. People tend to feel more comfortable with professionals who fully explain the process, and this is one of the reasons why the military ranks are so important. So you call somebody by their rank. That way you don't insult people by referring to them by their first name. That's disrespectful, or their last name. That may seem disrespectful. That's why military people always refer to people by their rank. It gives them a set way of identifying individuals. People tend to feel more comfortable with professionals who fully explain the process, what they're going to do, will be expected of each person participating, the purpose of the meeting, and limits of confidentiality. When beginning meetings with children and adolescents, explanations will need to be made that they can understand. Spatial issues of confidentiality will need to be covered. Education about your role is important, as well as what you expect of them. How you will include your parents, how you will include their parents or caretakers also needs to be made clear. First meetings with groups and families, the reality is that in most states, um, a adolescent, an underage individual that's coming to counseling, the counselor has to inform the parent of just about all the information that they acquire about that underage person. That's the way it is in most states. Each state has their own laws and their own rules, but in most states, that's the way it is. So they can't keep information from the parent, but they can choose when to give the parent that information. First meetings with groups and families, be sure that members of your group are acquainted with each other. Clarify ground rules for talking. Explain what the role of the participants will be. In families, you may want to ask how the members want the family to be different. Confidentiality needs to be discussed and an agreement reached about how information will be shared outside the group or family. For subsequent sessions, some practitioners like to start their sessions by allowing the client to initiate the conversation, thus setting the direction of the meeting. They may say, "Where would you like to start? Let's begin by discussing the progress you have made since our last meeting." Confidentiality is one of the most important elements to address at the beginning of the first meeting. You need to assure clients that information shared with you will be kept confidential, secure, and not shared with any others unless they sign a consent form. One of the hardest areas of the clients to understand is mandated reporting of possible harm to self or others. If they say that they want to kill somebody or they want to beat somebody up, It is your responsibility to tell somebody, to make that known to the authorities, to make that known to the individual that they're threatening. If they want to harm themselves, a lot of times people will talk about killing themselves or doing harm to themselves, throwing themselves off the top of a building, like the former Miss USA did a couple days ago. um, but it is your responsibility to tell somebody that they are saying that. It's like if somebody threatens the president of the United States, it's not a joke. It's, suicide is not a joke. And if somebody jokes about suicide, then it is your responsibility to tell somebody so that they can make sure that they don't do any harm to themselves or to anybody else. That's just the way it works. This isn't the playground where you can say, "I'm going to kill you," and it doesn't mean anything. This is a professional situation. Suspected child abuse and neglect. If they give you that kind of information, then you have to go to the authorities and tell them. It is your responsibility to do that. Elder abuse. It is your responsibility to tell the authorities that elder abuse is taking place. Begin your discussion of confidentiality by covering the legal limits of your state, and every state is different, of course. New Mexico is not the same as Arizona. Iowa is not the same as Nebraska, or Illinois, or Wisconsin, or Minnesota. Minnesota. And I'm sure Colorado is not the same as Arizona or New Mexico. Explain the boundaries of confidentiality. Most agencies will have a statement of confidentiality and informed consent that clients must sign during their first appointment. If a client is mandated by the court to see the practitioner is required to report back to the court. So anything they tell you has to go back to the court. So if you're trying to determine if this person should be released from prison, and they tell you that as soon as they get out, they're going to find their old lady and beat her up, then it is your responsibility to tell the court, well, he was just kidding. No, you can't tell him that. What you have to tell him is he said he was going to beat up his wife or his girlfriend or whoever it was when he got out. You have to tell him that. That's your responsibility. If the client is considered a minor, the parents or guardians usually have the legal right to know what happens in a session. Each state has their own laws regarding sharing information with parents. Many practitioners will only disclose information if the child's behavior is a threat to self or others. So if they're masturbating, for example, that's probably not something that you have to tell the parents. But if they are cutting themselves in places that the parents rarely see, then that's information that you have to give to the parents because they are damaging themselves. Um, if they're talking about bullying somebody or if they're being bullied, that's information that you have to give to the client. Not all the information that they disclose to you. Possible problems a minor could disclose: being sexually promiscuous, using drugs excessively, threatening to run away, having been abused or neglected, feeling suicidal, or feeling homicidal. Groups create additional issues in confidentiality. Confidentiality must be discussed during the first meeting. Most practitioners recommend that the group members agree not to discuss information covered in the meeting outside the group or with anyone in the group after the meeting has ended. Many organizations require administrative contracts, which may include detailed descriptions of the nature and limits of confidentiality, explanations of when disclosure is required by law, what to do in case of emergencies, payment terms, confidentiality of records and email communications, rights of the client to review records, telephone and emergency procedures, cancellation policies, information about the practitioner's  training, education, and licensure. Other information that the client needs, they need to understand the payment process, how does it take place, emergencies, telephone or email contact, how contact between sessions will be handled, cancellation policies, and length of meetings. The closing of a session is just as important as the opening minutes. The practitioner may want to discuss possibility of future meetings, what has been covered in the sessions, request feedback from the client. How am I doing? Ask a client what has been helpful, support the client's courage. Keep in mind that different cultures have different expectations. Closing statements that you might potentially use. How would you like to end today? We have 10 minutes left today. This seems like a good place to stop today. We've talked about some important things today. Although we need to end for now, it seems like it might be helpful to continue our discussion next time. We have 15 minutes left. Do you have any closing thoughts about our meeting today? Let's talk about what we have accomplished today. What did you find most helpful in our work today? I would recommend that we meet weekly for the next 4 weeks and then evaluate your progress. Does that plan sound okay to you? We're about out of time and have covered most of the points on our agenda. I think this is a good point to end. Shall we meet again next week at the same time? And that is it. Okay. So that's it for chapter 6 and chapter 7. Next week we'll tackle at least chapter 8, if not also chapter 9.